from a brand perspective, how important is kind of that global footprint? In Japan, South Korea, how important is for a brand like Red Bull to get involved in multiple cultures and regions in esports versus traditional sports?
Well, see, a lot of players in America, or a lot of businesses that sponsor players from America, they think that it only matters to do well in their branding in America. They never really consider sort of pushing their branding out to international places like Japan or China, Korea, and places like that. I feel like it's very important to get to take into consideration that people from all over the world watch whatever specific game you're playing. There's tons of people in China who play. There's probably more players in China who play Street Fighter than there are in America. Like China's a pretty heavily populated place. This game is very popular in those areas, so it would make more sense to sort of brand out there than it would out here. The money-making value is, of course, a lot bigger out here, so that's pretty important too.
So, Dennis, kind of getting into you, and then I'll kind of give you a little plug here. But Dennis is considered by the Guinness Book of World Records as the first professional esports player. And so, what would you say, Dennis? And if you want to kind of give an introduction about yourself first, but what differentiates esports today versus esports when you first got started?
It's a lot bigger. Obviously I started in the 90s. So I was the world champion of Doom and Quake 2 and a bunch of first-person shooters in the mid-90s. We certainly didn't fill stadiums back then, but I'd like to think that we filled virtual stadiums. There were still tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that would follow these games online. I would say actually probably the thing that I noticed most for a long time was that players today don't spend, it's obviously changed probably in the last couple of years, but it's ultimately about your brand. You yourself, your name is a brand, and I think for a lot of players today, I don't think they spend enough time cultivating their brand. It doesn't always have to be about money. Because certainly during my days when I first started playing, there really wasn't a whole lot of money.
Do you think people back then did a better job of cultivating their brand, their individual brand?
They were really. I was like probably the first and only for many years.
Right.
I wrote monthly columns in some of the big PC Gamer and other popular gaming magazines. I wrote books. I did a lot of interviews. I really thought of my name, which was Thresh, as a brand. I hired an agent back in the mid-90s to represent me. You're always representing yourself and you're always representing your brand. And I think especially in the world we live in today, where accessibility, with Twitch streaming, they catch people doing really funky stuff on camera, because they forget that they're being recorded, or they don't really think about, the image that they're projecting. And ultimately, for brands and marketers to get involved with the player, it's really about, it's about how that player represents their brand. And so I think that really should matter. And I think even today, I see a lot of players that don't seem to care quite that much about it, and they end up losing.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think they don't care?
It's just immaturity, I think, partly.
So how do brands kind of help these individuals get past that, from the immaturity level, but what do they need to do to help, kind of improve that relationship and just improve them professionally?
I know a lot of brands today have, they provide media training to players, but, ultimately, I know as a player, you learn most from your mistakes. So some players just have to screw up and they get dropped and they come back stronger. I think some players, you take someone like Double Lift, he has a, slightly offensive but funny kind of demeanor, and that's kind of how he's built his brand out, which works for him. I think there's greater opportunities than ever for players to build their own brands, but and there's more platforms than ever, whether it's Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Plays TV, where you can, YouTube, where people can kind of build an image of themselves that potentially the audience will be attracted to.
And so, Darryl, kind of speaking, what does Red Bull do to kind of work with players and teams to help them improve their brand, help them grow, essentially?
Well, basically, for me, they've done a lot. I was the kind of guy who sort of lived a really fast life. My mannerisms weren't that well when I first came into the
To
community.
be
honest,
mean? Like, explain that.
I was a little wild. I'd
had a good time.
Probably curse, here and there, and things like that. But Red Bull, took me by the collar and kind of shook me up a little bit.
Have a Red Bull, you'll calm down.
And now, I feel like I can represent, the company who has my back, at places like this. And it's just amazing how I would dream of things like this for me happening, but I never saw it actually happening. I never saw it as a reality until now. It's
would you put yourself in that? So you would, say you're immature at that point. What did Red Bull see in you? What do you think?
I felt like they could basically see the future of me. They probably looked underneath everything and saw that I basically had the potential to be a great candidate to represent Red Bull, a great candidate to represent how esports players should be. Currently, a lot of esports players are just really wild. It's like esports is going in a direction where it's sort of getting a little classy. You can't be as wild as you want to be. You have to, be professional at times. And,
I
play a game like Street Fighter, so it's already a fighting game. And we kind of grew up in that culture.
Right.
But now we have to act professional. So it's like, two different angles you're trying to balance at the same time.
What can brands do from a broadcasting standpoint and streaming standpoint? Mm-hmm. What can brands do to help facilitate growth for the streamer, broadcaster? What are ways that they can better improve that experience for a viewer through promotion of their product? How do they get more involved in these viewing experiences?
I feel like that's a great question because so some streamers, when they're first starting off, they don't have a great fan base, Mm-hmm. And a lot of people who are interested in certain games, they don't even know that there's a community within that game. So I feel like Red Bull any company in general, as a whole, could provide sort of an audience to tack in on the audience that the streamer already has.
Right.
They could also help the streamer or player or whoever it is, YouTuber, push their branding in a specific way. Not a lot of streamers have the resources to do exactly what they want to do. Like
one thing they did for you was you have a page that's on Red Bull that's just your content. It has articles about you. It has your history on Red Bull's esports site.
Right. Yeah. That's absolutely amazing. Like there's really high quality professional pictures on there. Because I take terrible pictures by myself. So they have a lot of things. And they just really if it was, to be honest, for a lot of esports players, if it weren't for the sponsors, they wouldn't really be able to do as much as they did. But to be honest, they would still sort of be able to get by. Esports, it's already an established community. There's when you come home from work, what are your kids doing? They're mm-hmm. playing video games. Everyone plays video games, and it's already established. So.
Right. So, Dennis, what would you say are some of the struggles that you have faced personally when speaking with an endemic sponsor or brand with Plays.tv or your future or your past companies that you've worked with versus a non-endemic? What are some of the struggles there from helping a non-endemic understand the space versus an endemic that has a lot more understanding and has worked in esports for a while?
Yeah, obviously it's a lot easier now working with non-endemic brands just because everyone's talking about how big esports is. You simply have to share audience numbers,
right.
Show them a picture of, the Staples Center, being packed to the gills for a gaming event. I think it's easier, but I still think there's a lot of challenges, and I think that's why people are here. There's a huge gap between how much revenue you generate and this audience size. And people haven't quite figured out exactly how to. I mean, some brands have, but to genuinely and authentically reach this audience. Esports is not on traditional TV,
right?
And so commercials in the traditional sense are not necessarily the best way to reach the audience that's watching esports. So I mean, I think the challenge is always, at least for the big brands that have yet to come into or are looking into it, and I've spent talking to companies, everyone from ESPN and down, where it's what is the backup plan if it doesn't work out?
Right.
Until you have, let's say ESPN, who's dabbled in esports, if they can convince a big brand to come into the space, and it doesn't work out. The advantage that ESPN has is that they can say, okay, I know that didn't work out, but we'll give you advertising in these, the NCAA finals or something like that to make up for it, right? And so, I think it's obviously just a matter of time, but having some backstop to, okay, yeah, our first try at esports didn't quite work out, but there's a backup plan where we can still reach a big audience, I think is ultimately what some of the biggest brands that have not entered into this space yet might need. And I think that's why Turner with the E-League may have some of that clout as well, because again, if it doesn't work out, they can give them an audience elsewhere.
So I want to get the Q&A in just a second. I want to ask each of you just a 15-second answer here. You have three options, each valued proportionally to one another. You have a major event, a top-tier professional team, and a high-profile individual broadcaster. What does a brand value more? And pick one of those three, and then kind of a short explanation as why. Darryl, you want to go first?
I think that a company would value a top-tier broadcaster, like streamer, basically.
Yeah.
More than those other options.
A team.
But of course, they value the other options as well. Mostly because I feel like it has the most versatility when it comes to representing your company. Mm-hmm. But also, you can show the competitive aspect of what you're doing as well, Right. Because at the same time, you always want to represent yourself. You don't always want to represent,
another brand.
Another brand. Yeah.
Dennis, what about you, real quick?
I think it kind of depends on the company, really. I mean, if you're an apparel company, you need your apparel to be seen. If you're more of a competitive product like a mouse or a headset or something like that, you may want to reach a more competitive player. Obviously the holy grail is someone that is both a very popular streamer and a high-level competitive player. And there are certainly players like Bjergsen on TSM that kind of fit that bill. Yeah, I mean, they just don't. They're not streaming 24/7.
Right.
So from a pure ongoing audience perspective, the reach is less. But you also get to associate with your brand with someone that people aspire to become.
Awesome. All right, we want to do Q&A.
Yeah, let's see if there's any questions real quick. Any questions out there? You got a couple of there's a question right there in the middle. Go right ahead.
Yeah, you guys mentioned when you were working on improving your brand, the ways that you did that were being taken by the caller and shown the error of your ways, or making mistakes and having to recover from that. But now that the industry has grown so much and the definition of a pro player has become what it is, are there other resources that, let's say, gaming companies or brands could point a player to do it more independently without necessarily having to go through such a aggressive experience?
Darryl, you want to answer?
Failure is the best way to learn, to be honest. You come into a world that's basically very professional like this, and your background is like nothing like this. Basically, you're so wild, and you just don't know how to act when it comes to this. And part of the reason why I even picked up Street Fighter was because of the way it is. It's very close quarters and aggressive, and that's just kind of the culture behind it. But yeah, you just gotta think about it. Really, you gotta sit down and sort of meditate upon it and think, what's the best way to approach this kind of situation for me? What, like, for the people who are wilding out, are they successful? Are they failures? You know, and you sort of learn upon that. So I feel like the best way for companies to approach something like that is, and because they've probably already been through they've already been through a situation like this before, so they can probably give you some tips on how to straighten up your act. But it really depends on what kind of esports genre you're into. Like if you're part of League, you're a very team-based community, so everyone's gonna like sort of not be as wild and have each other's back, and they're a little more quiet. So I don't know. It kind of depends on what kind of company it is.
And these teams and players are looking for, they'll listen to someone educating them, and if they bring in someone that will, teach them how to, how to act professionally or how to act with a sponsor, they'll 99% of the time they'll listen.
Part of the challenge is that there's no like any major sport, you come through the ranks of like junior high, high school,
right,
college, and you're trained all along the way. Esports, you literally go from your parents' bedroom to being on stage
kicked
at
out of your parents' bedroom.
Right.
Yeah.
It's pretty shocking for people. And, if you're not mentally prepared, which most of these kids are not, there's only one path, which is just to learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, a lot of these kids they're 17, 18, moving from Europe to North America, living with a team for the first time, living away from their parents for the first time. So they're put into very, unique situations. And so that's where it, I think, comes in some sort of, someone to work with that will help them improve and grow.
Cool. Thank you guys very much. That was
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you.
Very insightful.